Thank you, Kelly. Welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have everybody here today as we speak with Ray Lozano as he helps guide us on how to talk to our youth about alcohol and vaping. I know I could use some help on this topic. I have a couple kids in Seattle Public Schools up here in the Pacific Northwest, one that is a rising junior, and I'll have another high schooler next year. So I'm excited to hear how I've probably already screwed things up and get some tips and tricks for myself. My name is Allie, and I'm one of the co-founders of Pacific Northwest Parent Education. And just wanted to say a quick thank you to all of our donors that have made these events possible and free to our community. We will be posting some things in chat, but this is a Zoom webinar. So if you need to communicate with me or anybody on our team or have a question for Ray, throw it in the Q&A and we'll aggregate these along with the ones that you sent in at registration. And we will do our best to get your questions answered. Also, our biggest question we always get is this recorded and will I be able to share this with my partner or somebody else after and kind of remind myself all the details? Yes, it's recorded. Everything will be sent out, including all the resources that Ray mentions and notes that we're taking alongside with you today within the next week after the event. Again, we're just a bunch of unpaid volunteers making this happen, so it might take us a couple days, but all the resources will be sent out. And at the very end of as you log off, a quick, very, very short survey will pop up. Please fill it out. We're already working on our lineup for next year of speakers, and this just makes sure that we're using those dollars donated to bring in the topics and speakers that'll make the biggest impact on everyone's life. So please fill that out. Also, you'll get a free pass to attend one of Ray's self-guided courses, blueprints on how to storytell and make these connections the way that he's going to teach us about today. And the course is worth $400. So your name gets entered to win that. So there's that value there. I know everybody just wants to hear from Ray, but I'm going to give a quick introduction. I discovered Ray as he was being interviewed on other podcasts and just really resonated with his ability to, instead of something that I can tend to do with my kids, oh my gosh, I heard this is scary. I heard this is happening at your school. I read this article and just dump information. Kid zones out and the conversation is just dead in the water. Ray has a different style. He's been doing this for 35 years. He's a prevention specialist, comedian, educator, counselor, and works with youth to make healthier, substance-free choices. So he uses the humor, that storytelling I was telling you about, along with the evidence-based prevention strategies to connect. One of the podcasts I was on, they were talking about how there's schools that bring Ray in to talk to kids before they go. Every kid at the high school has to attend before going to prom or before being able to sign up for the sports teams at the school. I think one of the things that really works is on his team, he has teens. He has kids on his team that are our kids' ages, a little older, a little younger, maybe. So the voice he's using to connect resonates with them in ways that, maybe don't feel natural to us. So um, you don't need to hear any more from me. I'll pass it off to Ray, but we're so happy to have you here, Ray, and take it away. We're here if you need
Great.
us.
Great. Man, thank you for that introduction. That's so kind of you to say all those nice words and everything. And yeah, everything we're going to be talking about today gets run through a filter of kids because how do they hear it different? And, we want to make sure that we're getting a message across to them. And, like you said, I've been doing this for a while. So I don't want to waste a lot of time. So the things that we're going to go through today is where did we get these ideas on how to talk to kids when it comes to drugs and alcohol? Because it's all based off of these studies that were done quite some time ago. And then how should we talk to our kids when it comes to drugs and alcohol? So I know we have vaping on here and alcohol, but this formula that we're going to be talking about can be used for anything that parents want to talk to their kids about. And I saw the questions that came in. And then how do youth hear the information that we're presenting to them? Because sometimes we feel like we're speaking English. We know our kids speak English, but they're not hearing it. And then that language that we need to use, and then how to set up your household and all of that. So we're going to jump right into it. And I know you guys are monitoring all the questions and everything. So we're going to be talking about connections and making that connections with kids. And so that's what we're talking about today. So how did we get this information? Here's where early addiction theory came in. Okay. So way back, they did this study, 1951 to 1962, so about 11 years. And they took this little rat and they did this study over and over again. And they put this little rat in a particular type of cage. And this little cage that they put him in was not much bigger than maybe two shoe boxes put together. And they isolated this little rat in this cage. And there was no type of stimulation, there was no novelty, there was no social interaction, but the rat had free access to morphine and heroin. And I know if there's anybody in the audience that ever saw these commercials back in the 80s and 90s that showed this little rat. So they put this little rat in this cage and, all isolated by itself. They gave it water and they gave it water mixed with morphine and they gave it food. So the little rat would wake up in the morning, he'd eat a little food, drink a little water, hit that morphine bottle, he'd take a nap. Then later on, when he'd wake up, he'd eat a little food, drink a little water, hit that morphine bottle, take a little nap. And he just started this routine doing it over and over and over again. Well, eventually, after doing it for some time, the little rat stopped drinking water and he was eating food, taking morphine, taking a nap. And he kept doing this over and over again. Well, somewhere along the line, one of the scientists thought, I wonder if we force this little rat to press a bar, would he do it to get that morphine? So they gave this little rat a little task and a little bar that this rat had to hit like 3 or 4 times. He'd hit it, he'd get a little bit of morphine, he'd eat some food, and then he'd crash out again. And he kept doing this over and over and over again. And they continued to increase the number of times he had to hit that little bar. So if there's a chat and if anybody wants to put a number in that chat, how many times do you think that little rat got to the point where it hit that bar to get that morphine? Because they kept increasing that number, increasing that number, and increasing that number. Well, put a number inside your head, audience, and thank you so much for being here on a Tuesday afternoon. And so what they eventually got up to is they got up to 3,000 times. It took the rat 6 hours to hit this bar 3,000 times to get a hit of morphine. And so, what eventually happened is the rat realized, I don't have time to eat because I got to work all day hitting this morphine. So, eventually, what happened to the rat is it died from starvation. And they said, wow, morphine is really, really, really addictive. So, what they did, what we got out of the conclusion of this is number one, we got addiction is a chemical dependency problem. So, the brain becomes reliant on certain substances to function. Once you get that substance inside your brain is going to need it to function on that. Number two, and this was a big one that they brought out, drug abuse is a matter of individual weakness or poor decision making. And they figured that out through this study. And the third thing that they got, and this is where we get a lot of our information that and how we present to kids, behavior can be controlled through fear, punishment, or avoidance messaging. So what they said is if we put a little shock on that bar and the rat hits it and gets shocked, he's going to stay away from it. So punishment's going to work. Or taking it away, then the rat's going to completely do that. So we do that a lot of times with our kids is we base all our information on fear, or if you do this, you're going to get punished, or we don't give them the message at all. And I've seen that happen time and time again. So out of that, here's how that translates. What schools took away from that is that it's a zero tolerance policy. Okay. If you smoke weed, then this is how many days you're going to be out of school. If you have a vape on campus, so everything had a zero tolerance policy. And the next one is, and I see this a lot because I do assemblies, are fear-based assemblies. These are assemblies that try to scare kids. And I've seen this happen time and time again where they will tell kids, if you smoke weed, you won't go to college. If you drink alcohol, you're going to ruin your life. If you do this substance, this is what's going to happen. And I see parents talk to their kids a lot of times, and it's all fear based. And the last one is messaging is focused more on consequences than context. So, one of the things that schools that I have worked with, want me to talk more about the context of the drug. If you smoke weed, here's what's going to happen. And we realize that this is going to happen with your memory. This is going to happen with your short-term memory. This is what's going to happen with your motivation. Here's all this kind of stuff. As opposed to if you smoke weed, these are the consequences that you're going to have. So we see this study that was done way back then for 11 years, and it gets reproduced and reproduced and reproduced. And people think, oh, this is the way that we should be dealing with our kids. Well, finally, somebody challenged that study, and it was called The Introduction to Rat Park. And this Rat Park was like groundbreaking, but it did not get the traction that the other one got because the other one had a lot of finances behind it and a lot of things were based on it. So they came up with this different study, and it was called Rat Park. And for people that work in the field, this was really revolutionary. And so this study was conducted between 1978 and 1982, and it made social connections with other rats. So instead of isolating a rat in a little two shoebox kind of cage, they built this cage that was about the size of a two-car garage, and they put all kinds of stuff like you can see in this photo here. They had little places for rats to hide. They had little places where they can gather together. They had places where they could make choices. They had places where rats could make decisions. They built all of this stuff into Rat Park. And so there was physical space for exploration so rats could discover things. There were toys, there was novelty, there was the ability to choose different things, and free access to morphine and heroin. So they gave these rats all the heroin and morphine that they could possibly want. And you know what happened? No rats went to the morphine and heroin. And they thought, well, that's kind of unusual. They offered it to them, they put it in specific locations where the rat had to walk past it, and none of the rats, tried the morphine. Or they did try it, but they didn't keep using it. So they kept going to the water, they kept eating food, they kept doing all these little different things that rats like to do, and they totally avoided the morphine. Now, here's where this study got really crazy. They took rats that were addicted to morphine, and then they put them inside these cages. And what they realized is that these rats that were addicted to morphine all of a sudden started to wean themselves off of morphine. They got themselves completely off within a matter of a couple of days, and the rats did not go back to morphine. There was this huge study that came out during the Vietnam War because they were afraid when these Vietnam vets came back, there was going to be this huge explosion of heroin in the United States, and they never saw it. And this is where one of the ideas from Rat Park came from because the rats started to wean themselves off of morphine. And it was just eye opening to them. So it kind of invalidated a lot of what the first study came out with, saying that morphine was highly addictive. And they started to realize, wow, maybe it's not. And so here's the conclusions that we got from that. Drug consumption dropped dramatically. In Rat Park, enriched with social environments, drug use dropped because they no longer needed it to cope with isolation or stress. Please remember this. Many rats avoided morphine entirely. When their needs were met through connection and stimulation, the drug stopped being appealing. And the last one, what we talked about, rats previously addicted reduced their use. Environment, not willpower, drove the change, showing that behavior shifted when conditions improved. So, what did that bring? What does that mean? What did we get out of that? And how does that translate? Addiction could not be explained by substances alone. So, environment, stress, relationships, and unmet needs all play a major role in why people use and keep using. Another one, environment, connection, and meaning were primary variables. When their needs were met, the drive to use the drug dropped, showing that context, not just chemistry, matters. So the environment that they're in and the environment that we set up as parents when it comes to talking to our kids and helping our kids deal with this drug and alcohol issue that's out there. And risk behavior is not driven solely by exposure to substances. This is so true in my life. I came from a family that was crazy when it came to drugs and alcohol, had brothers that used heroin, has a sister that probably did drugs this morning, mom and dad that both drank. And I was exposed to all of that as a kid. And one of the things that I realized is I don't have to do drugs and alcohol. So just because there's an environment doesn't mean that kids have to do drugs and alcohol. So a lot of the information and the way that we present information is based on that first Rat Park study. When this one, and the conclusion on this, if disconnection raises risk, then parents must prioritize connection over compliance. So, parents that are watching right now, please understand that connecting with your kid is going to help them way more than them being compliant in what you have. And we're going to talk about both of those, but you want to make that connection with your child. You want to be able to connect with them and be able to get that information across, but it's not through compliance or consequences, it's because they have a relationship with you. Now, the programs that I worked with in the past, we talked a lot about this and making connections. When I ran this treatment program at Loma Linda University in Southern California, we talked about making connections with kids. And at no point during the 7 weeks when kids were in there were we going to talk about drugs and alcohol in a negative way. We weren't going to talk about them in a positive way, but we were going to make connections with these kids. And we saw a huge success rate. So, parents, please understand that out of the Rat Park study, one of the things that I want you to understand is making a connection with your child. When's the last time you smiled at them? When's the last time you just told them I love you without any kind of without any kind of thing behind that? I love you, so please do the dishes. I love you, so please throw the trash. It's just I love you because you're my kid, right? Or just smile at them. And I know when you do that and you haven't done that for a long time, kids are like, "Whoa, what's happening to mom and dad here?" But understand what we're going to be talking about is making that connection because that's what's going to help your child when it comes to drug and alcohol use. So the thing is connections. What's the starting point for making a connection with your child? So let's get into the next thing. How should we talk to our kids? Okay. Inside the adolescent brain. Let's talk about that. Now, everybody that's watching, what I want you to do in order to get the full effect of what we're going to be talking about is I want you to take yourself back to when you were 16, 17, and 18. Okay. So I want you to be able to put yourself in that spot, take a moment, whatever you got to do to put yourself back at 16, 17, and 18. Now, for some of you watching, I'm sure that's going to be pretty easy. For some of you watching, like me, it's going to take me a moment to get back to that age, right? But yeah, okay. So I hope everybody is there. Now, here's what's crazy. The way the human brain develops, it develops from the back to the front, okay? So the very first thing that happens when a child is born is this back part of the brain right here is the very first part of the brain that's active. What that is that's up close vision right here. Then the next big part is going to be far away vision. The part where most of your junior high and high school students are is this middle part of the brain right here. This is muscle control. So this is the part of the brain that helps them play baseball. This is why they like lifting weights. This is why they like doing all that kind of stuff. The final part of the brain is this part for human beings that develop is the frontal lobe part of the brain. It's the decision making long term part of the brain. So if you are getting close to retirement and you have some money put away, this is the part of the brain that helped you to do that. If you're going to go to dinner tonight and you got to be there at 6 o'clock in the evening, this is the part of your brain that's going to get you to wherever you need to go and be on time. Now, for all the young men that are growing up, or for all the young ladies, this front part of their brain for young ladies does not turn on. Please hear that. Does not turn on till right around age 21. That's when this part of the brain opens up the door and says, I'm ready to work. Okay. Now, what it's doing between age 5 and age 21, and it's not like at midnight on their 21st birthday this happens, but this part of the brain right here is gathering information and it's saying, how am I going to work once I turn on and start working? Young ladies, age 21. For young men, that part of the brain does not turn on until right around age 23. Now, I know if I could see some of you on the camera that have kids that are 16 or 17 right now, you're probably nodding your head saying, yeah, I get that, right? I totally understand that. So that part of their brain is not even working yet. So when we're talking to our kids and they're sitting across the table from us and we're speaking English, we know they understand English, but for some reason we could just see those words bouncing off their head. And as soon as they stand up, they do the complete opposite of what you ask them to do. That's because this part of the brain isn't working. All right. So everybody right now, age 16, 17, and 18, okay, you're back at that age, and adults in the room as well. Let me ask you this question, okay? Now, what this is a very scientifically designed frontal lobe question. What this question is designed to do, it's designed to go into your ears, right? It's going to get processed so fast right here, right behind your right eye. This part of the brain is going to process this question I'm going to ask you. It's going to fire an electronic impulse to your muscle control. Muscle control is going to say a word out of your mouth as quickly as it possibly can. So put your fingers on the keyboard. Okay. Get ready to type an answer. Put it in the chat. So everybody get ready. I'm going to ask you this scientifically designed frontal lobe question. Here we go. Get ready to put an answer in the chat. Ketchup ice cream, good or gross? Okay. Now, I'm sure if I were to look in the chat, probably many of you in the chat will be saying gross, right? And so, yeah. And there's always one or two people that say good. And if I ever hear a kid say the answer good, I'm never going to ask them what they brought for lunch because they don't understand food combinations, right? So gross. Now, when I'm working with parents or I'm working with kids and I ask that question, ketchup ice cream, 99% of the audience will say gross. Okay. Now, let me ask you this question. Just go ahead and answer this in your head. For those of you that said gross, how many of you have ever tasted ketchup ice cream? Probably none of you, right? How many of you have ever cooked or made your own ketchup ice cream? Probably none of you, right? How many of you, this is your very first time in your entire life thinking ketchup ice cream? This is the very first time you've ever thought of ketchup ice cream. Probably a whole bunch of you, right? Now, here's what your amazing brain did, and it happened in the frontal lobe part of your brain. When I said the word ketchup, right behind your right eye, it immediately grabbed the flavor of ketchup because you know that flavor, right? Then when I said the word ice cream, your brain immediately grabbed whatever flavor ice cream you like, tried to stick it together inside your head and said, gross, not going to work. Okay? That's what your frontal lobe part of your brain did. Now, what you did right there, it seems unbelievably easy, but only human beings can do that. Other animals cannot. And all the stuff that I read, I haven't found one animal that can do that type of prediction yet, other than human beings, because we have this frontal lobe part of our brain. Now, that is the part of the brain, this little tiny piece, 10% in a youth's brain that is working that can help them identify that ketchup ice cream is gross. Okay. Now, let's go back to you being 16, 17, 18 years old. Okay. Now, your brain is going to go back to that point, and we're not going to allow this frontal lobe brain part of the brain to work because this is how your kids' brains are picking up information. Okay. Now, I love asking these questions when I'm talking to high school students or junior high kids because they really get into this part quite a bit. But I'm going to ask you some questions that your frontal lobe part of your brain cannot answer, okay? Now go back to age 16, 17, 18. How many of you, when you were 16, 17, or 18, ever did anything unbelievably crazy, dumb, or really dangerous with your best friend? Right? Man, whenever I ask that question to kids, they immediately start laughing. Okay. How many of you, after when you did that crazy, dangerous, dumb thing, you had like an adult come running up to you in a professional manner, look at you in the face, and go, why did you do that? Right? I always get kids that laugh at that point. They're like, yeah, I've had that happen. How many of you at age 16, 17, or 18, after doing that crazy thing, you looked at your best friend, grabbed them by the shoulders, you shook them, and you laughed and you said, oh man, we almost died. And you were actually like excited about that? I get so many kids that raise their hand in this situation because they're like excited, like, wow, we just cheated death right there. Parents, please hear this, okay? Your child at age 16, 17, or 18 cannot, let me emphasize that word right there, cannot see dangerous things. They can't. And dangerous things actually look really fun to them. So when we present information to them in a dangerous way, what happens is we understand that kids do not. And for a lot of kids, a lot of students at that age, they have to try that out in order to understand that it's dangerous because it comes through experience. But thank goodness, whew, thank goodness they could not see dangerous things back in the day, right? Because if it were up to an old man like me, there'd be no human beings on this planet. Human beings wouldn't even exist if it were up to me because of my frontal lobe, right? Because I can see dangerous things. Let me show you how that works. Let's say we're a tribe of people, right? There's 70 of us. And we're way back in the day, and we live in these rock apartments right there. And we're getting fish out of the river right there, and we're eating berries off this tree behind me, right? And we're just, living in this setting where we have to hunt animals and do all that. And we're sitting around this big, huge fire. Late at night, we're throwing stuff in the fire. We're all looking at each other, right? And somebody comes running out of the bushes with 10 brand new pointy sticks. They look at all of us and they go, hey, hey, everybody in this tribe, right over that hill right there is this big, huge creature made out of fur, meat, and teeth. Who wants to go with me and poke it with a sharp stick, right? What's an old man like me going to say? I'm going to say, no way, no gracias. I'm inventing Spanish, right? I don't want to be part of that. What are all the young people in our tribe going to say? Yeah, let's go. Vroom. And they're gone, right? So good thing they couldn't see dangerous things. Back in the day, it really helped us. But nowadays, it puts them in a tough bind because when we present things in a dangerous way, what happens is an adult will say, wow, we need to stay away from that. And kids go, I don't know if that's true or not. Kids have a thing inside their head. And I'll just call it one upism, right? So if you get a presenter that presents and he goes, man, one time I took 7 shots of tequila, all the adults are like, wow, 7 shots of tequila, that's a lot. But kids are like, seven, I bet I could do 8, right? So it's because of that frontal lobe. So, parents, first step, understand when you present information to a child, when you're talking to kids about vaping or marijuana or any of those kind of things, and you present it in a dangerous way, the thing is, we feel like we're giving them good information, but their brain isn't accepting it. Let's say we were sitting in an auditorium and there was 60 people in here, kids from the age of 16 all the way up to 60. And I said, thank you for coming to this conference, I really appreciate it. When you walk out the door and you're going down the road, there's a police officer that hides underneath that tree over there. He likes to give out tickets. Everybody right around age 22, 23, when they leave, they're like, whoa, I need to go slow by that tree. But I can tell you what, you're going to get a 16 or 17-year-old that's going to say, I don't know if that's true or not. I need to fly past that. So, first step, understand when you present dangerous information, a lot of times it doesn't come across to youth the way you think that it is. So, how do you speak to kids? How do you speak fluent youth? All of you out there, I'm sure at one time or another have been around a 5-year-old. Okay, get ready because you're going to type some stuff into the chat. You've been around a 5-year-old one time or another. Some of you have been around that one 5-year-old. You're like, yay, they're wonderful to be around. You love hanging out with them. You bake cookies, you draw pictures, you take selfies, right? And I know some of you have been around that 5-year-old at some point or another. You've thought to yourself, wow, this is literally the son and daughter of Satan himself, right? And so, yeah, they break all their toys. When the dog or cat come in the room, they're like, I got to get out of here. And they're gone. And you lay the child down in the bed and you see that little number on the back of their head, 665 and a half. And you're like, whoa, little Damien is close, right? All right, here we go. Get ready to put something in the chat if you want. Tell me how a 5-year-old is going to react in this situation. 5-year-old is sitting on a sofa watching their favorite show. Somebody walks up and immediately changes the channel on that child. What do they do? Right, they cry. 5-year-old has their favorite little blanket. Somebody rips that blanket away from them. What do? They cry, right? 5-year-old wants to go outside. They can't go outside. What do? They cry. There's a cookie there, and that child wants to eat that cookie before dinner, but you don't want them to. How do they react? Right, they cry. Time for a 5-year-old to go to bed. They're not ready to go to bed. What do? They cry. A 5-year-old wets their little pants. What do? They cry. Hopefully, right? The evil one is like changing time. So you guys understand that. So here is how a 5 through age 21, here's how their little brain works, okay? Youth language, what youth speak. Youth have a very small letter I over a large letter E. I stands for intelligence, E stands for emotion. 5 to 21-year-olds speak very little intelligence, a whole bunch of emotion. Everything is this big, huge emotional thing that happens to a child. Okay. And so they speak a different language because you, over the age of 21, for those of you that have kids that you're older, this is what your brain looks like. Adults, you speak intelligence before you speak emotion. Intelligence is inside your head and emotion is pressed down. Now, what happens as you get older in the later part of your life, your brain will resort back to speaking emotion before it speaks intelligence. Okay. So, adults, let me ask you the same exact questions and watch how differently you answer. Okay. Adults, you're sitting on a sofa watching a TV show, somebody comes and changes the channel on you. What do? Right. You change it back, right? Somebody takes your blanket from you. What do? You get it back, right? I had this one lady one time say, you get a better lawyer, right? And you get the house, the car, and half of their salary. And I'm like, that's intelligence right there, right? You somebody tells you you cannot go outside, but you want to go outside. What do? You go outside, right? Uh, Time to go to bed. You're not ready to go to bed. What do? You stay up. There's a cookie there before dinner, and you shouldn't eat that cookie, but you want that cookie. What do? You eat that cookie, right? Here's the last one. You wet your pants. What do? Right? You cry. There's some emotion left, right? Yeah. You're like, that's why they make those products. So, adults, understand you speak a different language. Even though it's English, you're connecting with their brain at a different frequency. Now, here's the thing. I want you to look at emotion and intelligence as two completely different languages. So if you're speaking intelligence to a brain that only speaks emotion, what's happening is you're literally speaking Mandarin Chinese to a brain that only understands English. Okay? You could be giving them the very best information possible, but their brain is not going to understand that. Now, here's what's crazy, and here's where I really want you to get this one piece of information because this is going to help you with kids. Okay? Speaking of kids, and this is what I understand as somebody who presents to youth. Okay, the first one is whenever emotion speaks to intelligence, they both hate each other. They do. They get really upset with each other. As emotion is trying to explain this to intelligence, emotion is thinking to themselves, where's your heart? Where's your compassion? Where's your understanding? Things don't work like that. And emotion just gets really upset as it's trying to explain things to intelligence. So there's times when your kids are trying to explain things to you and you're just not getting it because you're speaking a different language. Now, here's the second problem. When we, who speak intelligence because we're adults, talk to emotion, emotion gets really upset. Okay. So when I'm speaking, my kids are grown now, but when I would speak intelligence to my kids, I could see that they weren't getting that information and it was making them really upset. So as I was speaking emotion to intelligence, I'm thinking to myself, why don't you get this? How come you don't understand this? And once I learned this information and started putting this together, it really changed my relationships with people because now I can listen and hear, are they trying to talk intelligence or are they trying to talk emotion? So the more intelligence we talk to our kids, the tougher time they're going to have, and it actually makes them upset. So now you're thinking, well, how do I talk to my kids if we're speaking a different language? Because these are two entirely different languages. Let me show you because deep down inside, you remember how to talk in emotion. You just haven't done it for a while and you've lost a little bit of it. Okay. So let me show you this. This is my best friend. My wife and I know this lady. Okay. And we're just going to call her Elaine. And Elaine is our next door neighbor. Okay. And we are very good friends with Elaine. And this is how much our friendship is. She has the key to our house. She knows the code to get into our house. We know the code to get into her house. When we go on vacation, we let them know that we're leaving. The house is going to be empty. If they could come in and check, make sure there's no water leak. Could they grab our mail and just leave it on the kitchen table? She's happy with that. When she goes, her and her family go on vacation, they do the same exact thing, and we watch over their house. Uh, there's times we'll have a barbecue. We're definitely going to have Elaine and her family over. When they have a swimming party, they're definitely going to have us over. You understand that type of friendship, okay? We're just deep friends and we know each other really well. Well, Elaine, one day, as I'm sitting on the sofa, I hear this knock on the door. And I get up, I open the door, and there's Elaine. And Elaine is standing there and she is sobbing and she's crying. And I look at her and I go, Elaine, what's wrong? Right? She looks at me and she says, my yellow lab buddy just died. And I look at Elaine and I go, oh, Elaine, that's terrible. That is awful. Right? I said, hold on, Elaine, just stand right there. Okay. I run into the other part of the house. I grab something and I run back and I look at my best friend Elaine and I say, Elaine, we've been friends for a long time, and my wife and I actually saw that this was coming. We kind of had a feeling because we saw how Buddy was acting. So, Elaine, I did something for you and I spent about 3 hours putting this together because we're good friends and I want to show you this. And I look over at Elaine and I take my laptop, I open it up and I hit play. And I have made a PowerPoint presentation for her. And this PowerPoint presentations opens up and it shows pictures of her dog Buddy when he was a puppy and pictures of Buddy jumping in the swimming pool and Buddy, at the park and all these really cool pictures of Buddy. Then the next thing it says, it has this quote from the Dalai Lama that I paid big money for. And it has the Dalai Lama coming out and he says something deep and emotional. And he says, we must watch over our animals and our animals love us as much as we love them. And they're, part of our family. And just has this deep quote. Now get ready because this PowerPoint presentation is going to get so much better. Because after I show a quote from the Dalai Lama, get ready because the next slide is a pie chart. And it's a very colorful pie chart. And it shows that most labs get hip cancer. And then it shows this little part of the pie chart that doesn't. And then it shows this little tiny piece of the pie chart right here where it shows Buddy never got hip cancer, right? And it has this incredible pie chart. And get ready because this PowerPoint presentation is going to get even better. The next thing it has a graph. And it shows this graph and it shows these lines going up and it shows that sometimes yellow labs get this twisty stomach thing because they eat too fast and it goes up like that and it shows all this stuff that happens and then it shows Buddy on this chart and Buddy's graph goes up because Buddy never got that twisty stomach thing. Now hold on, it gets better and it's going to show another chart and it's going to show that most yellow labs get hip displacement or hip cancer because of the way that their body's designed and how much they run. And then it shows that Buddy never got hip cancer. And it's just this wonderful PowerPoint presentation that lasts 22 minutes. Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Think about this because I know some of you are feeling it right now. As my friend Elaine is standing there crying, and I've opened this PowerPoint presentation and I showed her that graphs and all of that work I put into it, is she feeling closer to me or further away from me? Exactly. She's feeling further away from me and she's not feeling what she needs right there. Because what is Elaine coming to me with? She's coming to me with emotion, and I'm coming back to her with what? Intelligence. The more I talk to her about how wonderful her dog is and how it didn't get hip cancer and how it's okay and how the Dalai Lama talks about she's not getting it, right? Because she's coming at me with emotion and I'm coming at her with intelligence. Do you see how that works? Sometimes when our kids come to us, we bombard them with charts and information and all of this stuff, and their brain isn't ready to receive that because they're functioning on an emotional thing. We're going to go almost all the way back to the beginning of this presentation. Get ready because I'm going to ask you a question, okay? Let's reverse that scenario. Not reverse it, but let's change it. Knock on the door. There's Elaine. I open up the door. I look at her and I say, Elaine, what's wrong? She looks at me and she can't even get the words out of her mouth. And she says, my yellow lab buddy just died. Everybody in the audience right now, what does Elaine need right there? What does she need? Without even knowing, I know some of you said a hug. She needs a hug, right? And that is exactly what it is. And those of you who immediately thought hug, you still understand how to speak emotion. You just haven't done it in a while. What am I going to do? I'm going to look at my best friend Elaine and I'm going to throw my arms around her, right? Am I going to say anything? No, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let her cry and get my shoulder all wet. And I'm just going to hold her while she cries. And you know what? I'm probably going to cry with her. And after she's cried for quite a while, I'm going to sit her down at our little kitchen table where she sat 100 times before. I'm going to fix her a little cup of coffee and I'm going to give her a little piece of cake and I'm going to let her cry for a while and just share. And after she's cried and gotten all of that stuff out of her system, I'm going to look at her and I'm going to say something to the effect of, gosh, you know what, Elaine, this is crazy. I, I was just reading this article where the Dalai Lama was talking about how important animals are in our life. Isn't that cool? Because I see Buddy like that in your life, right? And you know what, Elaine? I was reading this thing about labs, how labs sometimes get this twisty stomach thing, and it's really painful for them. And sometimes they don't make it through that because they eat too fast. But that never happened to Buddy, right? And you know what? Sometimes yellow labs get hip displacement or cancer because just the way that their body's designed. Sometimes they run too much because they're just so that never happened to Buddy, right? Let me ask you this. Am I giving Elaine the same information that I did with the PowerPoint? Yeah, the same exact information, but what am I doing first? I'm making an emotional connection first. Parents, please hear that because I saw the questions that a lot of you asked. How do I talk to my kids about drugs and alcohol? The thing is, there's not a magic bullet. There's not these words. If you say these 6 words, uh, it's going to take place, right? It's an ongoing conversation. It's little mini check-ins all the time, but you have to make that emotional connection first before they're going to be able to hear you. Now, how do you do that? And we're running out of time. I can't believe how quickly this is going. Here it is. Here's the big takeaway. Wrong way. The big takeaway. Whoever asks the questions drives the conversation. If you are taking notes, please write that down. Whoever asks the question drives the conversation. You can get any information you want across to kids just by asking questions. When I do a 45-minute presentation to junior high and high school kids, there's probably about 22 questions that I'm going to ask the kids during my presentation. Why is that? Because I want them to engage. I don't want to just feed them information about alcohol, vaping, marijuana. I want them to come to the conclusions inside their own head. So that's what you're going to do. Now, the type of questions you're going to ask, when I was working with kids in the field of prevention and secondary prevention and kids had messed up, I'd ask them questions like, hey, how do you think, this makes your mom feel? I knew the answer to that. What do you think's going to happen next time you get offered, you know, an opportunity to smoke weed? And then whatever they answer, I would guide that conversation and I would just through questions because I've seen this happen so many times where parents have put this information in kids' heads. And then when they get to college, all of a sudden that information's gone because parents have made all those decisions for them. So the first takeaway is whoever asks a question drives the conversation. And then remember this emotion opens the door to information. So you need to have that emotional thing that's going to open the door. Let me close with this real quick. Game of tag. Okay. Now, everybody watching right now, I need you to put yourself back whenever you played tag. Okay. Go back to a place, and I'm pretty sure all of you have played tag one time or another. I'm not talking about the one on your phone where you're playing tag. I'm talking about the actual go outside, get sweaty, smell like sunshine tag game. Okay. And so remember how this would work? There'd be a group of you, six or seven. We had six kids, six or seven. We had six kids in our neighborhood that would play tag. Our house was the perfect house because there was plenty of places to hide. There was cars around it, and there was this big tree. Ray Lozano, was the slow running kid, right? Chad was the fast running kid. And so Chad would always be the first one up. So Chad would put his hands on the trees like that, on the tree like that. He'd start counting from 1 to 10. Put yourself back in the place because if you can put yourself back in the place, you'll get more out of the story. He puts his hands on the tree like that. All of us run and we all hide. Chad counts from the number 1 through the number 10. When he's done, he gets to number 10. He'd lift his head up, open his eyes, and he would holler, "What? Ready or not, here I come." Little Ray would be hiding in the bushes, right? And I would watch Chad, and in my head, I'm like, "Chad, please don't come my way first. Please don't." Oh, good, he's going away. So I see Chad's back. And I watch Chad, and I watch him start to flush kids out of these hiding places. So he'd go up, the kid would try to run. Chad ran like lightning. Boom, he'd tag kids. And I'd watch him tag kids, keep tagging kids. And then when Chad was super far away, in my head, I would calculate out, whoa, I think I can make it. So I would jump out of my hiding spot. Chad was completely in the opposite direction. As soon as he saw me, Chad would start running towards me and he was going to tag me before I could get to that tree, right? And put my hand on it. So I'm running as fast as my little legs run. I always looked like I was running in slow motion as a kid, right? So I am running, and I am finally getting to the place where I am getting so close to putting my hand on that tree. Now, as Chad reaches out, I take my hand and I stick it on the tree before he could tag me. And what did I holler? Safe, right? I made it. When I put my hand on that tree and I said, safe, I made it, believe it or not, there was this chemical reaction that took place inside my brain. And it gave me this feeling. And this feeling said, well, you know what this feeling said? It said, I'm going to be okay here. Everything's going to be all right. I'm going to make it. This is where I belong. And it was this chemical reaction. And it was such a good feeling to know that I made it. Parents that are watching right now, if you work with kids, please understand this. For your child needs to come home from school, be able to put their hand on the door of your house and go, safe. I'm all right here. I'm going to be okay here. This is where I belong. Because I'll tell you what, walk onto any high school or junior high campus, because I do it 400 times a year. I walk on a campus. You know how many times I hear the F bomb? Over and over and over and over again. You know how often they make fun of the kid that's a little bit out of shape? All day long. The little girl whose clothes don't quite match, you know how often they make fun of her? All day long. Kids, a lot of times when they go to school, do not feel safe. They need to be able to come home and put their hand on the door and go, safe. This is where I belong. I'm going to be okay here. And if you can do that, you have started the process of protecting your child against drugs and alcohol. Now, the next question parents always ask me, and I'm almost out of time here. Parents ask me, well, does that mean I let kids do whatever I want? No, no, not at all. It actually is completely opposite. You have very strict rules, but here's the thing you have strict rules that make sense to kids, right? If a child asks you, if you tell your child, clean your room, and they go, why? And you say, because I'm mom or because I'm dad, what you have just done is you've short-circuited something that their brain is searching for inside their head. They're not challenging your authority. Their brain is trying to figure out, why do I need to do this? And parents, you have rules that are really strict, but you have rules that make sense to kids. The reason why you clean your room is because this is our house and this is how we live as a family. The reason why you do dishes, it's not because I'm trying to force you. It's super easy for me to do dishes, but you're part of this family, and being part of this family means that you help with dishes. You know why it's important for you to cook one night of the week? Not because I like your cooking, right? It's important because that's what we do as a family. And the more you can put that in a child's head that they belong, that they're connected, the less likely they're going to use drugs and alcohol because they're going to want to protect that safety thing. If you don't make your house safe, you know what they're going to do? They're going to go out and they're going to find it. You guys, we ran through this information really fast. I hope you picked up a lot of stuff out of this. I wanted to take some time to answer some questions and get some additional information across. So, Allie, there it is.
Thank you. Right. Yeah. I really appreciate the focus around, the connection and not, having that wall up,
Right.
between your kids and kind of validating their life and just how different, their brain is and how that's all kind
Yeah.
of part of it.
Yeah, we speak a whole different language than kids, and we just don't realize that because there's no manual out there for parents to understand that. And
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I think about, like, every argument I've ever had with my wife has always been that emotional intelligence stuff. She'll
Hmm.
come up to me and give me some emotional thing, and I try to solve it with intelligence, and it just kind of escalates the situation as opposed to just connecting with her on an emotional level.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of we've got parents of all different ages here. I think kind of I guess this is kind of a two-part question, but the ones that have the much younger kids where maybe, they're not around the alcohol or vaping yet.
Hmm.
When do you start those conversations with them? So the relationship's open, they're open to talking, no walls are up yet. How do you start to kind of bring those questions? You mentioned, you have 20 questions you bring up to high schoolers. I'd love to hear more about those as well. Once
Right.
you're in a good spot and it's open communication with the high schoolers, but also for the young ones, how do you kind of broach the topic with
Ah,
them?
yeah, that's great. It's gamify your questions. Okay, so turn it
Hmm.
kind of into a game. And I'll give you this as a real quick scenario. I wanted my son to go to college, and I felt
Hmm.
that that was really important. So, do I sit down with him with a whiteboard and go, people that go to college make this much, people that don't go to college just and I thought that's
Hmm.
not going to get that information across. So, I started getting him to go to college by asking him questions. So,
Hmm.
we lived in a kind of little bit of a rough part of Southern California, a lot of homeless people. So
Hmm.
whenever we would drive, there'd be a homeless person, maybe on the side of the road asking for money. And I'd look at my son and go, how do you think that guy ended up in that situation? My son look at me and go, I don't know, Dad. Maybe, maybe he lost his job. Yeah, probably lost his job. And so I kept escalating these questions without my son realizing it. So there was a
Hmm.
point where I finally got to the place where I'm like, look at that guy out there. Do you think he went to college? And my son's like, nah, probably not. I'm like, yeah, probably not. And then I'd ask him, do you think maybe if he'd gone to college, maybe it would have been a little bit better for him? I don't know the guy's situation, but I'm just using it for my son. And I remember my son looking at me and go, yeah, maybe if he had like a degree or something, he might be able to use that for something. Right. And so it's so funny because my son finally picked up on what I was saying one time. And I'm like, son, do you think that guy went to college? I remember my son turning to me and he had this look in his eye and he goes, yeah, Dad, I bet he graduated the top of his class at Harvard. And I was not going to let that go. And I'm like, well, what do you think he studied that isn't helping him right now? So parents, ask your kids questions, just start real light. Just something like, uh, man, I heard, and depending on their age stuff, man, I heard vaping's really bad. What have you heard about it? And now that's not a question you want to start with. You want to start with questions way back at the beginning to get them used to answering questions. Because a lot of times we don't ask our kids questions and they answer real quick. How was your day at school? Good, right? They're not used to answering questions. So parents, just start asking your kids questions, all kinds of questions.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of where the basis starts right there.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's true. Yeah, and with the younger ones, it's, the first time they even see somebody out in public vaping,
Uh-huh.
maybe what is that? What do you think that is, Oh,
Right.
oh, we good. We have some live questions coming in right now. We can
Oh,
probably
good.
squeeze in one or two before we sign off here. How do you respond when your child asks if you ever drank when you were underage or did drugs, or when they're kind of justifying decision making based on,
Yeah.
hey, you turned out okay, and
Yeah. Yeah. You turned out okay is the part that they see, right?
hmm
See all the struggles that you went through during that time. And so, one of the things that I wanted to do with my kids is I wanted to introduce them to the bad part of drugs before their friends introduced them to the good part of drugs. My sister is a drug user, and I took my kids to her house to see how she lived. So, one
hmm
of the things is when you're talking to your kids about drugs and alcohol, you know, their friends are going to show them the good part, so it's okay to show them the bad part. If I
hmm
had come from a heavy drinking thing and my son asked me, well, you drank and you turned out okay. I'm like, yeah, I look okay now, but let me tell you the struggles that I went through, depending on their
hmm
age. Man, you know what? I spent time in jail. I was broke. I was living homeless, all that kind of stuff. And if you want to call that fun, and I was,
hmm
not fun. But understand it's not, you're not being a hypocrite if you did drugs and you're telling your kids not to do drugs, right? Because you've gone through and experienced something that's difficult and be able to share that difficult part, and let them know. Don't introduce them to the good part because their friends are going to do that. You introduce
hmm
them to the part that's a struggle, the part that you stayed up all night crying because you lost a job, the part where you lost your best friend, the part where you got injured and you didn't know what to do. Introduce them to the awful part of drugs and alcohol and just what a struggle it is and how you finally made it to this place.
hmm hmm Yeah, I think it's like you don't want your kids to like see you in a bad light. And
Yeah,
I think that's a really good reminder of, for them to learn from both, that
right,
piece of it.
right.
What if here's another question. What if my teen and his friend or peer group believe that drinking and vaping is normal high school behavior? So how do you ask questions or guide the conversation when this feels really normalized and they think
Ah,
it's
yeah,
normalized?
yeah. You know what? It has a tendency to do with because a lot of kids think that. When I ask the question, what percentage of kids you think are vaping in high school? Man, you get these like super high numbers, like 80s and stuff like, and it's super low. It's like 1 in 5 kids actually vape. It's just the kids that are vaping are very vocal and very visual and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would definitely talk about that again, asking questions. Well, why do you think everybody's vaping? Is your best friend vaping? Going back to that. And then I just read this one study that talked about most kids aren't actually vaping. And then I would, I'm sure you can find people that they could possibly talk to, or you could talk to them about vaping and the situations that they've gone through. So I know a lot of times kids will normalize that. But then again, if you go back to the protective factor, I belong here, this is, what we do in our house, that's going to have an effect on them as well. So I remember in our house, we made it real clear that, we're not going to do drugs and alcohol and stuff like that, and we're going to protect it as a family. And we started to have other kids come to our house because they like that environment. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a
Mm-hmm.
good question. That's a big question, but yeah. Well,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this is so helpful. I think when you mentioned those statistics of those percentages of how many people are actually vaping or drinking or utilizing cannabis, like where do you find those stats
uh-huh.
where that are true?
There's one that's called Smart Approaches to Marijuana, and they
hmm
always have some good stats. And I'm thinking there's another one, truth.com does a great thing on vaping. And
Okay.
is it Chris? Truth.org. Truth.org. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
And so yeah, they have some good information out there. And then
Okay.
if anybody wants to contact me, we have all that kind of stuff if they have questions and stuff. So yeah, I'm always happy
Yeah,
to have.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll
Any
be sharing, I know we're running out of time now, but we'll be sharing all of, Ray's information along with the recording and links to the resources for people to dive deeper. But I really appreciate your reminder to, I think it's the asking the questions, keeping the communication
Right.
open and not just shutting things down by just dumping the facts from the get-go.
Yeah.
Any other last things we should kind of hold on to as we move into our
No, the best part's making that connection
communication?
because when we see something happen as adults, we immediately want to fix it, and
Hmm.
this piece of information is going to do it. And it's a long process. And if your kids are younger, just start asking questions, playing games. And yeah, if we do this again, I'll talk about all the games you can play with your kids to get that information across and stuff. So yeah, this has been great, 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 great. So yeah, yeah,
Thank you so much, Ray.
you
And
bet.
thanks everybody for making it on the call. A reminder as you log off, please fill out that survey so that for our speaker series in the next school year, we're able to bring in speakers that you want to hear from or topics that you want to hear about. We're thankful that everybody spent this last hour with us, and we will get everything in your inboxes within the week. Thanks,
Cool.
everybody.
Thanks.